Hello job seekers, Melanie here with CGL Recruiting, and today we're going to be covering 5 things companies look for on every single resume. Now if you haven't subscribed yet, please consider doing that now. Give us that thumbs up if you feel like this data is helpful, and please share this information with other job seekers who are also in the middle of their job search. And if you haven't connected with me yet on LinkedIn, please feel free to do so. We have lots of great tips and tricks that we give out every day, and we'd love for you to see all of those as well. Okay, let's talk about our 5 key things that every company is going to look for on your resume. The number one thing that companies are always going to look at on a resume is key skills. Now, what do I mean by that? Remember, you have a lot of resumes getting thrown at hiring managers. And so what they're almost always going to do is skim through your resume very quickly first. And they're looking for those key skills in order to know that you're a match to the position. If they're looking at a resume for an IT person and they're hiring somebody in safety, they're probably not going to want to go any further. And that's why key skills is the first one on the list. If you don't have the key skills, you're easily going to move into that no pile very quickly. So do make sure you're highlighting your key skills as much as you can. We always recommend you have a bulleted section at the top of your resume, so that way you can make sure that your key skills are right in front of the person looking at your resume. Moving on to number 2, the next thing that companies are going to look at on your resume is your education. Now, different jobs are going to have different education requirements, and some jobs may even say they're willing to just take experience. But you do need to try and list some level of education on your resume. I don't care if you just have a GED, if you have a high school diploma and just a couple of semesters of college, whatever it is, you should list your education on your resume. If you leave it blank, people start to question it. So if you have a GED or you have a high school diploma and you chose to stop there, no worries. Please make sure you do still put it on your resume, but you don't have to put the date that you actually graduated or obtained your GED. That's actually something that's not looked favorably on in the US because it's such a linear path. People are worried about age discrimination. No need to put the dates, but do put whatever level of education you have. Let's move on to number 3. Our number 3 thing that every company looks for is tenure. Now, what is tenure? That's the amount of time that you stayed with each position that you had. People that have bad tenure are lots of times referred to as what we call job hoppers. And we do have a video on job hopping. I will make sure that we link that down in the description below if you are somebody that has moved jobs a lot. So what tenure do generally companies look for? They want you to have at least 2 to 3 years per position. Now, that's not always possible, so don't get upset if you're like, oh, I had to move after a year and a half because I was laid off because of COVID or whatever else. It's okay, right? Don't worry. What they're looking for when they look at tenure is people that are consistently moving every 6 months, every 9 months, every year, and they just move from job to job to job. It takes a lot of time and effort to train individuals into the way a certain company wants you to do the job. And unless they're a company that hires freelance type of individuals, they really do want you to have some tenure. So it is best to try and make sure if you are going into jobs that you are staying about that 2 to 3 years if it is possible. If you feel like you're one of those people that has job hopped a lot, please do go off and watch the other video. Now, I do want to say this is actually a change from in the past. If you'd asked me this question about what's the right amount of tenure, if you'd asked me, 10 years ago, I would have said that number is much higher than 2 to 3 years. But the workforce has changed and adjusted. And where companies used to give you as an employee things like a pension, they don't do that very often anymore. You may get a 401k and yearly bonuses and stuff, but you don't have a pension anymore like you used to, that if you worked for 30 years, at the end of those 30 years, you got this pension program. And so that has significantly decreased the reason for people to stay with companies. We've also, unfortunately, companies hire and lay off a lot faster than they used to, and that too has brought that tenure number down. In fact, I actually have had some employers say to me, this person has worked 30 years in the same company and it was a very large company. How are they going to be able to make the move to my much smaller company? And so sometimes having really long tenure can even, believe it or not, work against you. So if you're in that situation, you do have to take the time to translate that tenure and make sure that you're showing competencies that will help apply for the company that you're going after for your new role. Number 4 on our list is career progression. Companies like to see that you started here and you worked to here and made it up to here and went to here. Why? Because it shows a bunch of competencies and it shows a reflection on your work. If you are not doing a good job in the position, you're not going to show career progression. If you are somebody who is a very unmotivated individual, you may also not show career progression. And companies are wanting people who are going to hit the ground running and be able to make an impact within the organization. So when they see that you've had this career progression, they see, oh, well, they must have, been diligent in this. They must have worked hard in this. They must have expanded their knowledge in this. So it is important to show some type of career progression. Now, some positions are easier to show this than others. If you are in a role like a nurse and you're in the same floor nurse role continuously, your job title may not change. So it's going to be important for a career progression that you're showing underneath the experience of the things that you've done, where you've done things like process improvements, or where you may have been on additional teams within that organization, showing progression in just another way. But career progression is definitely something that is important to companies, and you need to make sure it's on your resume. So what's our number 5 tip, that things that companies always look for on resumes? Well, that would be accomplishments. So it used to be that a lot of people were trying to recommend resumes in a format that was an accomplishment resume. So it had all of your accomplishments, and then at the very end of the resume, it had your reverse chronological order listing of jobs. Those really do not work well with applicant tracking systems. And let me explain why. You guys have been with me long enough now. I like to explain why when I'm giving you a piece of advice. So what happens with those in applicant tracking systems is, one, the accomplishments get separated from the different companies and jobs, right? Because they're just at a section at the top. And so the applicant tracking systems don't know what to do with them as far as slotting them under which job. So they just kind of go out there like your summary or something else does. The other thing is, when you have those type of accomplishments, I find a lot of hiring managers and HR and talent acquisition will actually skip them first, and they will go to your reverse chronological order career progression to see what your path was. I have found it much more valuable to job seekers to not do that kind of resume. In fact, the only people I think that really get away with that kind of resume is those of you that are at the C-suite. If you are at the C-suite, you definitely need to have a resume that is more accomplishment driven. But at that point in time, you're never going through any really of the online systems or anything like that. The C-suite is managed a different way when we look at those positions getting filled. So for you as a job seeker, how then do you get those accomplishments on your resume? Well, they're part of the bullets underneath each and every position. And when we talk about accomplishments, it's not okay to just say, I accomplished an increase in sales. We want metrics, right? We want to know, if you can, even what the issue was or what you're focusing on, what you did, and what the result was. Make sure you're listing out as much detail in that bullet as you can about the accomplishment. And it's much easier to understand your accomplishments if I can tie it to the company that you worked for at that point in time. And let me give you an example of that. Let's say that you implemented an ERP system on time and within budget. Now, that's a great accomplishment to have, but there's a huge difference if you did it with your employer that was only 100 employees in size versus if you did it for one of your employers that was global, $3 billion in 47 countries. So there is something to be said for taking those accomplishments and putting them as bullets underneath each one of the positions that you worked for, as opposed to having a separate area at the top that shows those accomplishments. All right, job seekers, I hope this information was helpful. We have more videos coming your way. Don't forget, from now on, every Thursday, we are doing a live Q&A event. Please make sure you tune in. It's every Thursday at 10 a.m. Central Time, and we will have any questions that you want to ask about your job search. I will do my best to answer them for you, and if I don't know the answer, I'll do some research and get back with you. All right, I will see you next time.